We've had nearly a week to sit with the Magic schedule. So, is the Magic schedule awful or is it the best thing ever? We'll do that and a little bit of a deeper dive into the Magic schedule today on Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is August 20th. It will be August 21st, 2024. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, it's the deep dive into the Orlando Magic's 2024-25 schedule. Why, on first blush, it looks really bad, but on deeper look, it's actually pretty good. We'll go over the pluses and minuses and some other notes as I did another run through the schedule here coming up in just a moment. But first, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. No matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload, we truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for. The Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Everybody hates the schedule. Like, seriously, every team has something about the schedule that they hate. You can ask every executive, every coach, every player. Their mind is going to go right to the negative of the schedule, and everyone's going to look at the parts that stink. The fact of the matter is, everybody hates the schedule when it comes out. Everybody gets screwed by the schedule makers one way or the other. So let's start there. Let's start with that fact that the schedule sucks. It's awful. It's terrible. It's the worst. And yes, it is terrible for the Orlando Magic. My first analysis, my first blush, I am guilty of falling into this trap too. My first blush on the schedule pointed to two key stretches on the schedule. It is the first thing that I pointed out. Pretty much the entire month of December just sucks. It is the worst. The worst. It's awful. The Magic will play a stretch beginning that December 3rd game against the New York Knicks. That critical game that we're all super excited about starts a really, really difficult run of games. The entire month of December. December 3rd at New York. December 4th at Philadelphia. December 6th at Philadelphia. I could stop there. That's bad. December 8th versus Phoenix. December 10th through 17th, we don't know the schedule because of the NBA Cup. But Orlando is scheduled to play Boston only 3 times, Milwaukee only 3 times, and New York only 3 times. So it's very possible the Magic will have one game added to their schedule from all of those teams, depending on who advances in the NBA Cup. The Magic also have Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago on that list of teams that are likely to get added to their schedule should they not advance out of the NBA Cup. But hey, the Magic are advancing out of the NBA Cup, so that means an extra game against some pretty good teams, or at least teams that are playing well. December 19th versus Oklahoma City, December 21st versus Miami, December 23rd versus Boston, December 26th versus Miami, December 27th versus Miami. This is a stretch of games against all playoff teams outside of Miami and maybe Phoenix, teams that have real championship expectations. This is a tough run. And it gets worse because only a few weeks after that, from January 6th to January 19th, Orlando plays another run of heavy playoff opponents. January 6th at New York, January 9th versus Minnesota, January 10th versus Milwaukee, January 12th versus Philadelphia, January 15th at Milwaukee, January 17th at Boston, January 19th versus Denver. And then they go out west. I mean, almost about a week and a half, 2 weeks after that. It's tough. And that's those two stretches, particularly where my mind immediately went to when I put the schedule down into my calendar. Because Orlando struggled against good teams last year. Orlando had the worst record among teams that made the playoffs against opponents with a winning record at 19-28. 19-28. That's just barely behind the Miami Heat, who are 19-27. The Magic feasted last year on the worst teams in the league. And I suspect with their defense, they will feast on those teams again. I'm not, no offense to Charlotte, who beat Orlando last year late in the season. No offense to some of those teams. I'm not worried about beating the bad teams next year. I think the Magic will continue to dominate the bad teams, maybe a few more losses here and there. But where Orlando has to get better is they have to win on the road. They had one of the worst road records among teams that made the playoffs last year as well. And they have to win these games against quality opponents. They have to prove themselves against quality opponents. Again, like I said on our last episode, this season is all about building consistency. This season is all about showing us what they're capable of doing and whether they can match what they did last year. They got to do last year all over again. And the point of growth they have to make is they have to start beating these bad teams. Now, the Magic beat a lot of these teams already. They swept Denver last year. They beat Boston at home. They beat Indiana twice. They beat New York twice. They beat Cleveland twice. It's not like they beat Milwaukee twice. They beat Phoenix. They beat Minnesota last year on the road. They have good wins against quality opponents. It's about consistency. And these stretches are going to be critical. Now, a bad December and a bad January are not a death knell, because last year Orlando went 13-18 in the months of January and December. They lost ground, and there's obviously injuries and illnesses that really hit them hard. They did a lot of work to build a good base at the beginning of the season, and we knew they would have that at the beginning of the season. I don't think they're going to have that at the beginning of the season. They play 60 of the first 25 games on the road. Orlando is going to have to be catching up and making up ground, because these stretches are really tough. And that's why the schedule kind of sticks. Because yes, Orlando is given this opportunity to be challenged. It's a big point that I made when the schedule came out. Again, my first impression of the schedule is like, okay, we are going to learn how good this Magic team is and how serious this Magic team is very, very early in the process. We're going to know by the time the calendar changes, and certainly by before the All-Star break, but by the midpoint of the season, we're going to have a good feel for where Orlando is and know that around the All-Star break, the Magic will be able to pick up ground. The question will be, how much ground are they going to need to make up? And again, I think they're a playoff team. I don't think they're going to fall like so far out of it like we're wringing our hands. But if they're really serious about competing for home court advantage, their schedule is very, very difficult. The Magic have a lot to prove and a lot to show and a lot that they need to take care of. This stuff is not easy. This is the part that is not easy. And for Orlando to repeat what they did last year, they are going to have to step up their game. They're not going to be able to do what they did last year and get the same result. The schedule's not set up for it. The big homestand is earlier. It's not at the very end like it was last year. The Magic are going to have to be a very consistent drumbeat. They're going to have to be more consistent. They're going to have to take care of their business, and they're going to have to beat some good teams and especially beat some teams in these difficult stretches. They're going to have to stay above water during really difficult parts of the schedule. So yes, the Magic schedule stinks. I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy with this part because I'd rather balance. I'd rather not have to play all these really good teams in a row. It's just confidence more than anything else. Half the battle is confidence against these teams. And the Magic are capable of beating these teams. Don't get me wrong. This part, I'd be upset if I were Jeff Weltman or Jamal Mosley or anyone on the team, because I would take it as a challenge, which it is, but the Magic have their work cut out for them. However, all is not bad. All is not terrible. The schedule actually breaks very favorably for the Orlando Magic in some very, very key ways. how the Magic got the best end of the schedule, and why their schedule is awesome. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with more than 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. We want to thank you for making Locked On Magic your first listen of the day, or whatever listen of the day it is. For your second listen or your next listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. I know their episode from Tuesday, so not today's episode, yesterday's episode, is about who the next bright stars in the NBA might be. If they don't mention Paolo, Banchero, get in their comments and tell them so. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBAs. Available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the first look at the Magic schedule makes you believe it's not in their favor. You know, they only face Boston 3 times, Milwaukee 3 times, New York 3 times, and Cleveland 3 times. They don't get Detroit 4 times. But likely 2 of those teams are going to be added back to the schedule. So in reality, the Magic do have a difficult schedule. In fact, the only time the Magic were mentioned on ESPN's schedule release show last Thursday was to say that the Magic had, at least by raw strength of schedule, raw opponent win percentage, had the toughest schedule among playoff teams. Okay, that's tough. That's a bad break. But then the analytics came. Then the schedule got broken down a little bit, and there are a lot of reasons to be very excited for the Magic schedule. There are a lot of things to really like about this team's schedule. In fact, this season, the Magic might have one of the easiest schedules in the league. According to Positive Residual, which does analytics that breaks down the schedule based on rest advantages, rest disadvantages, as well as travel miles, the Magic actually have the 3rd easiest schedule according to their strength of schedule metric. So yeah, bit of a wild swing there. Here's the reason why. The Magic play the fewest back-to-backs in the league with 13 back-to-backs this year. They're not the only one that has that. And typically this swings back and forth. So last year the Magic had 15. That was among the most in the league. This year they have 13. Most in the league is 16. So it's not like there's some crazy difference there. But the Magic are lucky they're on the low end this year with 13 back-to-backs. That is a big advantage. Then you look at how these back-to-backs are composed. They play 4 of those back-to-backs without travel. That's 4 home back-to-backs. So they get 4 home back-to-backs, which frankly, the NBA should make that normal. And if you're going to do back-to-backs, make them a home. Get rid of that travel element, home court advantage and the fatigue thing even out. In fact, the Magic only have 5 away back-to-backs. So that's 9 of the 13 right there. And one of those 5 is without travel. So they actually have 5 back-to-backs without travel because they'll play the LA Clippers on November 20th at the Intuit Dome and the Los Angeles Lakers November 21st at Crypto.com Arena. So already, they only really have 4 away back-to-backs. So 4 away game back-to-backs with travel, which is the problem with back-to-backs. Yes, you get fatigued by playing back-to-back games, but it's the travel that kills you. Trust me, I did travel for the first time this year. I went to Miami for a Magic Heat game, drove back to Orlando, covered a UCF game. I know I'm not doing the physical basketball, but I was exhausted for that UCF game. I can tell you that much. Orlando actually faces only 3 home away back-to-backs, and these are the back-to-backs I hate. I hate home away. And furthermore, on the away back-to-back issue, I look for bad travel back-to-backs. I told you all last August that Houston-Milwaukee back-to-back was going to be pain, was going to be awful. It was going to be terrible. And it was. Orlando clearly ran out of gas in that game against the Bucks. They only have one away back-to-back that I think is bad. And that is in March, they play Cleveland, San Antonio on a back-to-back. San Antonio, especially in March, might be a team you can get away with that with. But still, not a good back-to-back. I'm not super optimistic the Magic are going to sweep the Spurs again this year. The Magic have only 3 home away back-to-backs. And these are back-to-backs I hate especially too. Because it's tough to go from playing a home game out on the road. And frankly, usually for the Magic, it's home to like New York. It's not like home to Miami or home to Atlanta or home to Charlotte. This year, the Magic actually, I think, got a good break on these 3. The Magic play the Memphis Grizzlies on the road October 26th after their home opener against the Brooklyn Nets. They go to the Knicks, to New York, again, as always, on January 6th. That's a schedule loss. It's the only one I really think is a pure schedule loss. Memphis, you get the time zone back. I don't think the Memphis back-to-back is terrible. It's not ideal, but it's not terrible. Early in the season, I think you could get away with it a little bit too. And then Charlotte, March 25th against the Hornets. That's a fairly manageable trip. It's not, again, not ideal, but a fairly manageable trip. So the Magic lucked out in the way their back-to-backs are composed. On top of this, the Magic actually have a very, very good advantage with rest advantage. Now, rest advantage just means you enter a game with more rest than your opponents. Last year, the Magic had one of the biggest discrepancies between playing with a rest advantage and playing with a rest disadvantage. Last year, they played only 8 games with a rest advantage compared to 13 with a rest disadvantage. It is one of the reasons we can say that last year was pretty real because the Magic overcame a lot of schedule disadvantages, the back-to-backs, this rest disadvantage thing, to play well. This year, the Magic have a positive discrepancy between rest advantage and rest disadvantage. Not as extreme as it was last year, in the opposite. But the Magic have 11 games this year with a rest advantage compared to 8 games with a rest disadvantage. Now, this may seem like a small thing, and I haven't done the deeper dive to say, okay, well, that game against Boston at home, the Celtics are coming from Miami the next day or anything like that. I haven't done anything like that. So I don't know which games the Magic actually have these rest advantages on, but again, to say that the Magic have the third easiest schedule from positive residual when they take all this stuff into account, that tells you that the Magic probably do have advantages baked into their schedule. And the reason this is all important is because the thing I've been warning you about all summer long. It's going to be a tight race for the playoffs, for playoff seeding. It's going to come down to the final day of the season. And so if you can take advantage of little things here and there, remember that Houston-Milwaukee back-to-back, having that road trip at the end, that week-long road trip at the end of the season, that was a huge disadvantage. I told you all in August, get your work done early because that last week is going to be a hang on tight and pray that you get whatever seed you're going to get. And that turned out to be true. The Magic schedule, though, this year is set up with a lot of baked-in advantages. Baked-in advantages that could lead the Magic to be a better team. That could lead the Magic to steal a few wins here or there. It could be a win and a half. Honestly, it could be 2 wins out of all this. 2 wins is the difference between 45 wins and 47 wins. 45 wins is the 8 seed, 47 is the 5. Or 47 and 49. That's the difference between the 5 seed and the 3 seed. That's what I am talking about. The Magic schedule has all of these little advantages baked into it. And that's not even talking about, yes, you get a back-to-back in Los Angeles where you don't have to travel. You get that week in New York where the games aren't pressed together. It's Black Friday against the Nets. It's December 1st against the Nets. December 3rd against the Knicks, and then traveling to Philadelphia, not a bad trip after a game to December 4th. Getting out of the airports in New York is bad. That's traveling, having a back-to-back in New York is bad. Just because the airports are a mess. But the Magic schedule is set up for them to succeed this year in a way that isn't evident or isn't apparent just by looking at the schedule, but clearly is there and clearly is present. At the end of the day, the schedule balances out. You play 82 games. You play everybody virtually the same number of times. There's little variances here and there. So getting these little advantages, that's going to help the Magic. And that's why this year's schedule really, really works out for them. I do want to go back and talk about the very end of the schedule, that last little road trip, and why these games are important. We'll do one more deep dive into the schedule coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. FanDuel has so many great bets right now, even though it is the dead of summer, just before football gets started. They've got your NBA futures up. You can bet on the Magic to win the championship. You can even bet already on opening night. The Heat have come out favored by 1 over the Orlando Magic on opening night. Favored by 1. That's disrespectful. That's disrespectful to your Southeast Division champions. The Orlando Magic, the favorites to win the Southeast Division as well. By the way, you can get them on that at, if I can pull the odds up here, at -140. So about even with Miami with +140. They're already getting excited for the start of the NBA season, and you can too. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Check it out today. I have been hammering this point home, and I'm going to keep hammering this point home. I want to keep stressing this. The margins in the Eastern Conference next year are going to be very, very thin. Like very, very, very thin. Every single one of the 82 games that the Magic are about to play are going to be vitally important. Like every game is going to be big. Every loss is going to sting in ways that we may not know. Especially losses to bad teams. You got to beat the bad teams. I'm sorry. You got to take care of your business. It's one of the keys to success for the Magic last year. And one of the things that nearly upended them is they lost their last 2 games to teams under 500 and the Rockets and the Hornets. I guess they beat the Bulls, who were under 500. But they lost 2 of their last 3 to teams under 500 after dominating that all season. That's how thin the margins are going to be. Again, the difference between the 3 seed and the 7 seed in the Eastern Conference last year, the 8 seed in the Eastern Conference last year, was 3 games. I am expecting the same thing this year. The Miami Heat are going to be better. Jimmy Butler will be what he is. Bam Adebayo is a really good player. That is the Miami Heat are not dead until their carcass is lying somewhere, in the sun. They're burned up, and you're pretty sure they can't resurrect as zombies. The end of the season is going to be vital. And the way the schedule ends for the Magic is a challenge. Orlando typically has their big, long homestand in the middle of March. Usually it's like after the NCAA tournament comes through, so usually like mid to late March. This year it's early. The Magic have their longest homestand of the year starting February 21st, right after the All-Star break, versus Memphis, versus Washington, versus Cleveland, versus Golden State, versus Toronto, versus Toronto. A very manageable homestand. Should be a pretty good homestand. Then they're pretty heavy on the road. 11 of their final 19 games are on the road. That includes that homestand. So they have one final homestand at the end of March, a 3-game homestand, Dallas, Sacramento, LA Clippers. And then it's pretty much all on the road, or it's like pretty balanced in April to go home. April 3rd at Washington, April 6th at New Orleans. Washington should be a win. Magic have had a lot of success in New Orleans. That arena, Paolo just loves playing in that arena. I know they have DeJounte Murray. That's not an easy game. I'm not going to sit here and say that, count that as win. April 8th versus Atlanta, April 9th versus Boston, the final 2 home games of the season. Obviously, Boston, a very, very tough team, especially in April. That'll be big. But I think that the last 2 games of the season, I've already told people, I usually pick 2. I picked two road trips to go on last year before the playoffs. I am pretty much committing myself, life pending, to go on this final road trip at Indiana versus Atlanta. At Indiana at Atlanta. The Magic will close the season with 2 games on the road and a not so easy homestand to end it. These final 4 games are going to be everything. Because everything's going to be on the line in these games. Everything's going to feel important. And look, the Magic have winnable games. Like Boston is Boston. You count that for what it is. This isn't last year where the Magic were playing Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and you're just like, I don't know if the Magic are ready to play teams that are really ready for the playoffs. This stretch is manageable. And one the Magic can win, but one that is going to be vital. Honestly, I look at the schedule, and there are important games throughout the schedule. I'll maybe do a whole episode on the games I'm already looking forward to. You can guess what they are. There's some national TV ones in there. I'm very much looking forward to that NBA Cup game in New York against the Knicks. But honestly, the game that I think is the most important game on the schedule is going to be April 11th at Indiana. April 11th at Indiana, because the Pacers finished with 47 wins last year. The only reason the Magic finished in the 5 seed over them is they won the season series. And I am going to shout out our guy, Matt Moore from the Action Network and Locked On Nuggets. Season series matter. Division tiebreakers matter. In fact, the Magic got the 5 seed because of that division tiebreaker. All of this stuff matters. And yes, the Pacers went to the conference finals last year. They're a very, very good team. I think they're a better team this year with the full season of Pascal Siakam. The Magic are battling the Pacers. That is, frankly, their chief competition is Cleveland and Indiana. Those are the 2 teams the Magic have to be better than. I mean, yes, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, that feels like your top 4. There could be injuries that cause a few of them to dip. Maybe Milwaukee paces themselves and they don't go for wins as much. There'll be some intermixing, because again, these things, the 2 through 7 is going to be decided by like 2 games. Like every game is going to matter here. That game in Indiana against the Pacers to me is one of the biggest games the Magic, I can already call it this. It's going to be one of the biggest games the Magic play all year. Because that game could determine who has the tiebreaker. That game could determine who's holding the 4 seed entering the final day of the season for that matinee in Atlanta against the Atlanta Hawks. These games matter a ton. And you can go through the whole schedule and find games exactly like that. But to me, the way the schedule ends is going to be the right way for this Magic team to prepare for the playoffs. You're going to be playing teams that also have something to play for, that are capable of beating you, but you are capable of beating too if you play your game. And so the Magic, hopefully, all of these advantages that we talked about, hopefully that puts the Magic in the driver's seat. I'm going to say it again. I say this about games. It's not about the final 2 minutes. It's about the whole 48. If the Magic are able to do their work early, get out to a hot start, pick up some steam early, survive that December-January stretch, build up some wins, especially after the All-Star break in that February to early March, build up up, just like, again, stack up wins, like count them up. Build that cushion. The Magic are going to be a very good place to accomplish their goal of getting home court advantage. The schedule is difficult. I'm not going to subscribe to the belief that these advantages are everything. But there are advantages that the Magic have to take advantage of, that the Magic have to deliver on. And if they do that, they are in a position to take that next big step. I can't wait for October 7th and the start of preseason, but I cannot wait for the beginning of the season in Miami. It's going to be a fun ride. We got a few weeks to go before we really start talking about it, but the Magic schedule is certainly set up for this team to do some very special things this year. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, and Odyssey, and all of them you download podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. You, of course, find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@LockedOnMagic. Subscribe to us there. It helps us out a lot, even if you don't watch the videos. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. And for even more Orlando Magic content, be sure to check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. As always, thank you for your support. Now that you're done listening to me, be sure to check out the Locked On NBA podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NBA in the description below, so you don't need to search. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On our next episode of Locked On Magic, we are going to go Locked Off Magic. We're going to talk a little Orlando City. We're going to chat a little bit about how a team deals with expectations. Like I say, I try to go off topic, but I want to bring back Magic topics. There's a lot I think the Magic can learn from how Orlando City has navigated this very strange MLS season. We'll have a guest to chat about that. But until then, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.